So our headline this week is one, it's not that recent, although I only just recently heard about it. And the headline is Indian man to sue his parents for giving birth to him without his consent. Wants to be paid for his life. Okay, it sounds like a joke a little bit, that he's suing his parents for giving birth to him. So let's take a look. And this, the text comes from the Fox News website, but this made its way all over the place, originated in obviously the story in India, and got picked up in Europe. It was taking place last February. Raphael Samuel, donning a fake beard and sunglasses, said in a YouTube video posted on Tuesday that he is suing his parents because he was conceived without his consent, and therefore his parents should pay for his life. I want everyone in India and the world to realize one thing, that they are born without their consent. I want them to understand that they do not owe their parents anything, he said. If we are born without our consent, we should be maintained for our life. We should be paid by our parents to live. Samuel has been reported as a follower of antinatalism, an increasingly popular yet bizarre ideology that believes that it's morally wrong for people to procreate and takes a nihilistic approach towards human life, saying that humanity brings only suffering. Despite his intent to sue, the man says his parents have no hard feelings towards him, while he actually loves them. I love my parents, and we have a great relationship, but they had me for their joy and their pleasure, he told the print last month. So, reactions, thoughts?
Call a psychiatrist.
Okay. Although it's a growing movement, this antinatalism. The idea that, there's too many people in the world and we should be much more careful about who gets allowed in. They say that this is a movement which might, its growing popularity might make it easier in some of the countries that have, exceedingly high birth rates where they're trying to control the population, like India and China. They're promoting this movement. So I want to kind of underline a couple of notes from the article, and then we're going to look at a couple of sources. He says he wants people to realize that they are born without their consent, right? There's some truth to that. We are born without our consent because we're not born yet. And what is our status before we're born? We don't owe our parents anything. Well, we have something called kibud avayim, honoring our parents. How does that play out? How we understand it based on that. So when I saw this headline, there are a couple of Jewish sources that came straight to mind, among some other issues. So we're going to look at those two sources, and then we can raise some issues. And as usual, always, questions or comments are welcome. The first source that came to mind is an expression, al karchacha atachai, which is you live against your will, which is in Pirkei Avot, and we're going to explore that. The other one is a machloket that is described between the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai, and they debated whether it was better or not for human beings to be born. And they decided that it's better for man not to have been created, but now that we are created, we have to do the best we can. And so I thought that these two sources related to this headline, and we'll look at them in some of the commentaries and go from there. So the first source number one, Pirkei Avot 4:22, know all that is according to the reckoning, and do not let your impulse assure you that the grave is a place of refuge for you. I don't think that death is an escape. Against your will you were formed, against your will you were born, against your will you will live, against your will you will die, against your will you will give an account and reckon before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. The idea that on some level we don't want to be here. But in particular, against your will you were formed, against your will you were born, against your will you live, against your will you will die, and against your will you give an account. Don't think you can escape because this is what's going to happen. So how do we understand some of these expressions? Let's look at some of the commentaries. Against your will you were created, as the soul does not want to exit from behind the curtain, the holy place where the souls repose. So, right, the soul doesn't want to leave. It wants to stay where it is and to enter the innards of a woman in an impure place, right? The whole birthing process leads to a physical encounter with ritual impurity. Why would the soul all the way up in heaven want to come down and enter an impure human being, human body? And an angel comes and brings it out against its will and places it in the innards of the woman. So basically, imagine that you have this, you have the soul being grabbed and put inside the woman's body against its will. So that's the imagery that Rabbi Ovadia Bartanura describes in this process, that there is a discussion of the soul is being forced out of heaven into the physical universe. That's being created. Against your will, you were born. At the time of birth, the baby does not want to go out, and the angel brings it out against its will. Right? So this is not a process. There seems to be like a struggle. The angel is, no, I don't want to go. And the soul, I don't want to go. The angel instead pushes it. An angel instead pushes it forward and said, you have to go into the process of being formed in utero, and then you actually have to come out of utero. So what I thought was very interesting, and then we'll stop to discuss it a little bit. I remember growing up, there's a Jewish music composer by the name of A.B. Rottenberg. And A.B. Rottenberg composed a number of very popular Jewish songs involved in especially the Dveikus brand, the Rabbi's Sons, and in some of the Jewish music world, he's very well known. He has a song that's less well known, but I do remember listening to it. And song number 3 are some lyrics from A.B. Rottenberg's Neshamala song. Come with me, little Neshamala, let me hold you in my hand. We'll fly away, you and I together, to a place down on the land. Right? So there's some sort of angel telling the neshama that you got to go. Come with me, little neshama. Don't shy away, do as you're told. Right? You get the sense that the neshama is kind of holding back from all of this. There's a little child waiting to be born today. You're to be his spark, his soul. Right? This is your mission for this child to be born. So now the neshamala responds, but the malach will know, I don't want to go. There is so much pain and evil upon the earth below. Let me stay here up in heaven where it's safe and I'll be pure. Please don't make me go away. Can't you see I'm so afraid? Right? Al karchacha ata notzar, al karchacha ata nolad. Right? You are being created and formed and born against your will. The malach wants to stay. So the song continues, and of course the little neshama is born and goes into a body. Even though he's so afraid. Fast forward, we're the second to the last line on the bottom of page 1. Come with me, little neshamala, and let me hold you in my hand, and we'll fly away, you and I together, to a place above the land. Fast forward to the end of the life, and the angel comes back. This time it's not the angel for the soul to be born, it's the angel for the soul to be removed from the body, for the person to die and the soul to go back up. So now, how does the soul respond? Remember, the soul was very resistant to being placed into the body and to being born. Top of the second page of sources. But dear malach will know, I don't want to go. I'm not ready to go with you. Where you take me, I don't know. Let me stay right where I am. There's so much more I need to do. Please don't make me go away. Can't you see I'm so afraid? Once again, the neshama is resisting and rejecting going away, does not want to leave, does not want to go. Where the soul didn't want to go in the first place, now the soul doesn't want to leave because the soul wants to live. This is the end of life. The soul doesn't want to go. There's so much still to do. So in this song, we have the Al Karchacha Ata Notzar, Al Karchacha Ata Nolad. It's playing out the Mishnah's expressions that the soul did not want to be born, does not want to be into this world. But also, al karchacha atames, you die against your will, right? The soul doesn't want to go anywhere. We are in the place the soul never wanted to be in the first place, is now where the soul wants only to be. and doesn't want to be returned to its original spiritual home. So that's this idea, that tension which is found. And in general, within Judaism, we find that tension because, on the one hand, we value the spiritual realm, Olam Haba. Right? We value that tremendously. However, we also believe that this world is where the action is supposed to be, where our mission is to be accomplished. So the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is describing a very complicated dynamic of the soul. On the one hand, the soul wants nothing to do with the physical world. Although once it's in the physical world, it really wants almost nothing to do with the, it doesn't want to leave the physical and doesn't want to go back to the spiritual. I'll stop, and if there are any comments or questions, I'm happy to take them. Again, we're just scratching the surface, and we haven't really talked about what it means to live against one's will. These commentaries and the song that seems to express those sentiments are about being born, and then once we're here leaving, what does it mean we live against our will? So we'll hold off that for a moment, but any questions, comments, or reactions?
This kind of reminds me of the scene at Har Sinai when God says, "Here's the 10 Commandments. If you don't take them, I got a mountain over your head."
Right. This idea of what we do against our will is what we do against our will is something that Sinai analogy definitely comes to mind. Right, Ryan's talking about that. There's this. The Midrash says that at Sinai we said we will do and we will listen. At the same time, God held the mountain over our heads and says, "You better accept this, otherwise this will be the end of you. This will be your end. This will be this mountain will become your tomb." And it's that. What about the fact that some of us also know the very famous Midrash about how God went around to all of the nations of the world and said, "Do you want my Torah?" And the nation, so various nations said, "So what's in it?" And God said, "No, worship idols." So the nation said no. And the next nation says, "What's in it?" "Don't steal." Nation said no. Said, "Don't murder." Nation said no. So there's this whole, it comes to the Jews, and the Jews said, "We'll take 2." No, it was, we don't care what's in it, we'll take it. And so there's that, on the one hand, we're often connecting with this idea that, yes, we wanted the Torah no matter what. And we weren't even questioning what's in it. We just want to connect to God. And then you have also the same time, this concept of, no, we were forced to accept the Torah. And so there's kind of a tension in terms of doing what we, wanting it versus having to do it. And I think that that Midrash also plays into this. It comes in particular, this idea of, the way I once heard it explained is that on some level we have to learn to love to do what we have to do. Right? In Judaism, it's not just loving to do Judaism, it's having to do Judaism, but it shouldn't be a burden necessarily. Somewhere there's a happy medium where we learn to love to do what we have to do. This idea also emerges in a term that I'm sure many are familiar with, the term pintalayid, the spark of the Jew that exists inside. And it's sometimes mentioned with regards to the way Maimonides explain. There's a ruling with regards to the laws of divorce, that a husband has to initiate the divorce. And if he doesn't, then the wife can be stuck. And the rabbis had a rule in the Talmud that if a husband is found that he has to give the get and he refuses, the Talmud makes mention of a rule that you're kofin oso ad sheyom barotzani. You force him until he says, "I want to." And so Maimonides addresses this issue and says, well, usually we believe that a divorce has to be voluntarily given. So how is forcing him, beating him, physically forcing him to give a get, how is that him giving of his own volition? And so the way Maimonides puts it, and others take this further, is that deep down, the soul is meant to do what God wants. The soul desires to connect heaven and earth. And the soul is ultimately trying to do the right thing, but the body gets in the way. So the forcing, the beating, the coercion is kind of dislodging the soul from its being covered up by the physical impediments of giving the get. And therefore, when the person is physically coerced and says, I want to, that's their true self coming forward saying they want to. This idea that, yes, sometimes we have to, it's not that he's being forced, we're just removing the barrier, the unnatural barrier between his innate proper desire and what his mouth is saying and his interfering in this process. So, we talk about doing things against our will. There's both a spiritual and a physical component to this. So when it comes to the things we do against our will. So the soul doesn't want to come down, but once the soul's down, the soul doesn't want to leave and go back up. I also find it interesting that it talks about heaven and earth and up and down and the like. In general, Judaism believes in an afterlife, but we don't really have a directionality in that afterlife. We do the best. Often the imagery is there. It's kind of like when we talk about Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. Up, up, down, down. Up is good and down is bad. It's just the way we understand it, but it doesn't have to be that way. In any event, let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah also says, against your will you live. Who lives against their will? What does it mean to live against our will? So we go back to Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura once again. This, source number 4. This is the case of a man who is suffering with afflictions and wants to die, but cannot. So Bartanura says that in general, we don't live against our will, but some people seem to live against their will, meaning, I wish I was dead. Sometimes people who are undergoing a lot of pain and suffering will make that kind of declaration. And that's what Bartanura here says it means. Against your will you live. No one lives against their will ordinarily, but you'll find situations of people who are suffering and want to die but cannot. A couple of things, 2 reactions to this, and I'm also happy to hear if anyone else does. One, the idea that we look at life as not being, the act of living is not being imposed. Think back to what we said before. Once the soul gets down to this earthly realm, the soul feels that there's something to accomplish. So we don't live against our will. Bartanura has a difficult time understanding live against your will. Therefore, the Bartanura says it must only be talking about those people who are suffering so much so that they say that they would rather die but cannot. Right? In general, he's reinterpreting this. He's not saying everyone lives against their will. No, people ultimately, when they're alive, love life. That's why they don't want to die. But some people can be in a situation where they feel that life is a burden and they would like it for it to end. The other reaction to this Bartanura is, of course, this gets us into the conversation of the fact that within Judaism, maybe this is another way to understand the Bartanura. We don't have the power to say that we want to end our lives. So we know that Judaism is against suicide and euthanasia and the like. Physician-assisted suicide, all these things. Maybe there's that coercion, there's that al-karchacha against your will, that even for those people who feel that they can play fast and loose with life, no, you don't have that power, you don't have that control. When it comes to the way we understand it, God is in control, and we don't have the right to decide when we want to, how we want to live, how we want to die. That ultimately is God's decision. So the Bartanura is looking at this when it says against your will you live, right? No, everyone, no one is being really oppressed in life. Life has wonderful capability and possibility. At the same time, there are individuals who may feel this way, and it's an unfortunate feeling to have, says the Bartanura. And at the same time, it does remind us that everything in Judaism has a certain element of compulsion. There's the idea of mitzvah, of commandedness, of submission, that's part of it. And so it could be that even within our lives, which, as we saw, the soul gets very, very much used to, nevertheless, there are rules and regulations and obligations that must be followed. Questions, comments, or reactions to the Bartanura or how we're discussing it? So Rabbi Yisrael Lipschitz, the author of the Tiferet Yisrael and the Yachin commentary of the Mishnah, you may have seen those Mishnayos with Yachin Uboaz. They're called. They're kind of the big tall Mishnayos. Those are the commentaries of Rabbi Yisrael Lifshitz to the Mishnah. He has a little bit of a different interpretation to this. He takes V'al Karchacha Atachai and says about this. I'll read the Hebrew translated. It shouldn't be understood that kind of against your will you live. This Mishnah is not necessarily commenting on a certain oppressiveness. Right? The pleasure, the benefits that one feels that one gets out of life, pele, are wondrous. And it completely defies logic that a spiritual entity can merge with a piece of flesh. So much so that they become combined, that they're one entity. This reminds me of a colleague of mine, Rabbi David Aaron, who would ask someone, who are you? And the person would say, I'm James. No, who are you? I'm James. He said, no, you are a soul playing the role of James. When we look at who we are, yes, we have our personalities and our characteristics and our identities. At the same time, we are spiritual beings who have been inserted, joined, merged with a physical component, who then have a mission to play. We are, in a sense, characters in a larger drama. So the Yachin commentary is saying, what does it mean? Al karchacha atachai? Not that you live against your will, but it blows your mind if you really think about what life is and what physical and spiritual realms are, and the combination of the neshama in the body and the soul playing the role in the physical world with Torah and mitzvos. It goes completely beyond us. Al karchacha atachai. You can't explain why or how this makes sense. And so what the Yachin commentary is introducing into this whole discussion is that it's not about the dynamics of the soul resisting coming down to earth, or resisting being born, or ultimately resisting life ending. It's not about that life is full of resistance or complication or obligation. Those are true. But this idea is that we are so blown away by the concept of life, right? It's not so much the mystery. It's a mystery too, but it's completely mind-blowing. And al karchacha, really against our will, against our logic, we have to accept this. And this opens up a whole different way of looking at this Mishnah. While the Bartanura looked at it and tried to figure out what categories of entities or people it was talking about, whether it be the soul or whether it be the person who's feeling oppressed. The Rabbi Lifshitz takes this into al karchacha atachai. The whole concept of life is mind-blowing, complicated, beautiful, and wonderful. We see a certain spiritual component there. We see a certain, a spiritual element there. And it opens up to a conversation. Well, I'll take a look at Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, a philosophical conversation here as well. So Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, of course, has numerous books, articles, and ideas. And in his Kol Dodi Dofek, which is a work that he wrote actually about the state of Israel, and how the state of Israel, the role of the state of Israel plays on the cosmic scene and the individual scene. He has the first chapter talks about this idea of the righteous suffer. Talks about theosophy, and but he's talking about fate, and a major theme that he talks about in Kol Dodi Dofek. What's the difference between fate and destiny? And so, as we see, fate is something where we are acted upon, and destiny is something that we can create. Kind of the difference between object and subject, and passive and active. So let's take a look at some of Rabbi Soloveitchik's analysis of this from Kol Dodi Dofek. What is an existence of fate? It is an existence of duress, in the nature of against your will do you live. He quotes our Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. It's a factual existence, simply one line in a long chain of mechanical causality, devoid of significance, direction, and purpose, and subordinate to the forces of the environment into whose midst the individual is pushed, unconsulted by providence. The eye of fate emerges as an object. As an object, man appears as acted upon and not as actor. He is acted upon through his passive collision with the objective outside, as one object confronting another. The eye of fate is hurled into a sealed dynamic that is always turned outward. Man's existence is hollow, lacking inner content, substance, and independence. This idea of object, the idea of fate, is the baseline condition of human beings. If we don't do anything to make ourselves into something, if we live this life of fate, we're going to be stuck. We are objects, not subjects. However, there is action we can take. We can, our default setting may be a life of fate. However, moving forward, the slogan of the eye of destiny is against your will you are born and against your will you die. But by your free will do you live. Right? There's the opportunity to change it. We can coast, we can float, or we can act. Man is born as an object and dies as an object, but is within his capability to live as a subject, as a creator and innovator who impresses his individual imprimatur on his life and breaks out of a life of instinctive automatic behavior into one of creative activity. According to Judaism, man's mission in this world is to turn fate into destiny, an existence that is passive and influenced into an existence that is active and influential, an existence of compulsion, perplexity, and speechlessness into an existence full of will, vision, and initiative. So, building upon what the Achin mentioned, this Mishnah should get us thinking. This idea of al-karfach atachai, the idea of our reality, of our life in its totality, spiritual and physical, is a logic-defying reality. Rabbi Soloveitchik kind of roots this back into reality for us to understand. And yes, we don't understand life, we don't understand death, birth and death, but we have the opportunity in life to create an experiment. We can remain in that place of al-karchacha atachai, in a life of fate, or we can turn it into something, act upon it, and create a life of destiny. And we can see, where he goes on this with regards to the state of Israel, is that the state of Israel really transformed Jewish life from one in which we had been acted upon, certainly with what happened in the Shoah, to taking action on the world stage into a life of destiny. So that's another, the idea also that this Mishnah creates a lot of food for thought in terms of our role in all of this, right? The Indian man, in a sense, has a point. We don't control when we are born. And in some levels, the soul doesn't want to come down here, possibly. At the same time, life, though, does provide us with this platform for a deeper understanding. And for some people, says Bartanura, it's complicated and difficult and they don't even want to. But that's not our choice, as he points out. Or taking it into the Yachin explanation that, no, this whole thing shouldn't be understood as something being imposed upon us. It's this tremendous, mind-blowing opportunity that we can't fully fathom. And Rav Soloveitchik tries to bring it a little bit back further to earth, and yes, it could end up being all for us a life of fate, of objects without any influence, or we can turn it into something that plays our own destiny, and that's the direction. That is our opportunity. Questions or comments on this before we look at the other source?
Rabbi, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, two things.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Friday afternoon before Shabbos, I got a call from a very, very close friend of mine who's 14 years my senior. Armin and I had been together with her and her husband on many trips around the world, some of them a
You all right?
month long.
You okay?
Very, very close. Somebody's on speaker.
Did you tell him you were feeling it?
So, somebody should be on mute if they hear me saying that. Anyway, she's not been well at all. She's had great trouble breathing. She has cancer. And she said to me, her cancer doctor told her that she could take 4 oxycodone. And I said, what? And then I immediately called Gail Prop, who said, that doesn't make your breathing feel better. Rabbi, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
It doesn't make your breathing feel better. You can't breathe. And I almost had a heart attack. And which is what I initially thought. And I called her back. I said, Willie, you can't take oxycodone. And she said, please, she intimated that this is her decision. She can't take it anymore. And then Gail proceeded to call her lung doctor, who knows my friend's lung doctor. And it could have gotten much worse. The cancer may have spread, and her children are with her now, and she's got hospice. And all weekend and yesterday and today, I've been really upset, obviously, but it's her choice. And, but one other thing is that I watched an incredible documentary, which I highly recommend, called Surviving Death. And it is written and produced and directed by Ricky Stern. And we happen to be extremely close with her grandparents who have since passed. And it's an extraordinary look. And I really would love for you to perhaps do it's worth, I think, doing one of these talks, or just in general, a sermon or whatever, because people really do experience, if they've been in an accident and they are dead, and then they see all kinds of lights and colors and visions.
Right.
And so it's been a very interesting couple of days for me. That's why I was so interested in what you had to say.
Seems like you're spending a lot of time in this sphere, in this realm.
Right.
But look, I think that towards the the individual situation you mentioned, that fit that the bartanura karkachatachai is sometimes how people feel. Here we're talking in terms of text, in terms of sources, in terms of concept theories. When it comes to real people, you can never judge a situation or a person until you walk the mile in their shoes. It seems to be more common these days for the physician-assisted suicide, and even if it's not real physician-assisted suicide or the physician killing, it's providing more or unnecessary drugs or treatments. There does seem to be less of a tolerance for al-karchacha atachai, and this is also a much larger discussion for what kind of heroic measures need to be taken as people get into different situations and severe illnesses and conditions and the like. And it's obviously a much larger issue. It does seem that there's, again, not judging situations, individuals, but there seems to be less tolerance for, or less appreciation for, life as something that is not for us to determine its ending. But in terms of that surviving death, it's fascinating. I had read about that documentary. It's on my watch list, and I hope we'll find a good forum for discussing it, because it's one of those things that we just don't know. It would be great if someone could go and film what happened while they were there or something like that. But so far it hasn't. But it definitely is a realm. For me, that brings to mind the Yachim's comment here, that we just don't understand. It's mind blowing. What we don't understand about this process of life and death could fill volumes, is what he's saying. We can't grasp it. And Salvation is an attempt to try and make some sense out of subject and object. But yeah, so thank you for raising those points.
Well, I did recommend that her son and daughter watch this documentary.
Mhm.
Because my friend and their children are just the type that might just very well ask
Yeah.
their mother, what's going on? Are they seeing their father? Is she seeing, her late husband? And I mean, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Right.
Rabbi, I have a quick question that's related.
Sure. Sure.
Halakhically speaking, are we allowed to make advanced directives?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. There is there are whole documents that have been composed by the Rabbinical Council of America, the Orthodox Union, Agudath Israel. In general, there's, as you would imagine, two schools of thought. How precise and how specific and how limiting some of those directives should be, or versus how more expansive or flexible they should be.
So do they have to be, if you're making your advanced directives, should you discuss it with a rabbi?
You can, is it a mitzvah to do so? Look, I think that, one of the things that, and just been my experience, in dealing in situations, with people who are in distress or in serious cases of illness.
From outside, so when they go to the cemetery,
Right.
The one thing that I have encountered is that it seems that more and more hospitals are willing to do less and less. Whether it's the business, you want people out of the bed. They just don't always seem to necessarily have as much tolerance and patience and understanding for fighting for every moment of life. So, in that respect, having some religious input into your advanced directives is helpful, so that they won't do anything without first, consulting whoever it is you designated as your religious, guide or counselor. Also, sometimes with regards to if there are different family members who have different ideas, or not everyone gets along, sometimes this can be helpful. I think that, even just kind of a broad statement that you want, that any, final decisions or, go through, a religious official. Some people identify rabbis or backup rabbis, or the document that the religious groups have, or something like that. It sometimes can be helpful.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
You use the expression down here.
Yeah.
Quote, down here. Is there an up there?
Well, that's what I said before. We somehow, down is worse and up is better. And that, look, we have a tradition for that. Ma'alin b'kodesh. Ma'alin b'kodesh. We have what's it called? We have we go up. We go up in holiness. So I would imagine that it comes from there. This idea of up being better and down being worse. Okay, so let's look at this other source. We can see again the Mishnah Pirkei Avos is dealing with a lot of the same subjects that this Indian man suing his parents came up with. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there's the other Gemara that stands out is this idea of should we even be created? So source number 7, Gemara and Eruvin, the sages taught for 2.5 years, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagreed. These say it would have been preferable had man not been created than had been created. And those said it's preferable for man to have been created and not been created. Ultimately, they were counted and concluded it would have been preferable had man not been created than to have been created. However, now that he has been created, he should examine his actions that he has performed and seek to correct them. And some say he should scrutinize his planned actions and evaluate whether or not and in what manner those actions should be performed so that he will not sin. So you have Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel arguing, should man be created and not? A couple of things we have to understand. A, what's he talking about? Right? It's better that we don't exist. How can that make any sense? Second is a little bit more fine-tuned, is that this is Shammai and Hillel arguing, the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel arguing. We know that which opinion do we follow? We follow the school of Hillel. So does that mean that Hillel is the one who says we shouldn't have been created? That kind of changes our vision on Hillel's side. Usually we think of Hillel as the more optimistic here. So we're saying that Hillel thinks that we shouldn't have been created. What's going on here? So that's the Gemara. And I think this Gemara also relates to this idea, basically, now we're here. Is it better that we not be here? How's that supposed to make us think? So how did Tosfot, the commentary of Tosfot, understand this? Source number 8. And Tosfot, in their classic way, finds another statement which says it's better for people to be created, right? We should be thankful for our ancestors, because if it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't be in this world. So the Tosfot says, well, some people should be created, some people shouldn't be created. The righteous, they should be created, but the ordinary among us, they shouldn't be created. So that's how Tosfot understand this idea. It's not talking about good people, it's talking about not such good people. To me, it's a little bit unsatisfying, because remember, the Gemara concludes, now that we've been created, we should do the best we can. So that doesn't seem to be talking about wicked people. So again, I would imagine that when this rabbinic teaching is discussed, it's kind of throws everybody for a loop, because what do you mean we shouldn't be created? There was a rabbinic vote and they decided we shouldn't be created. Let's look at another possibility. So sources number 9 and 10 come from Rabbi Yosef Chaim, Iraqi Jewish scholar who very prolific in all areas of Jewish study. And these are some of his thoughts on this piece of Talmud. Sources 9 and 10. Nearly, Plutayu Bahai Time Amar Savar as Linan Bosa Rov Minyan Umar Savar Basar Rov Binyan. Dal Harov Adam Osaver is Yosef Min HaMitzvos Mikol Mitzvah Borei Malach Tov Min Aver Balach Ra Lefiza Avanos Hem Rov Minyan. So he says we have to look at this quantitatively and qualitatively, right? Rov Minyan qualitatively, Rov Binyan, the concept that exists. So the idea of Rov Minyan, the numbers, a numbers game. So he says, what's the numbers game? Sins versus mitzvahs, good deeds versus bad deeds. And he says, let's face it, based on the number of sins versus the number of mitzvahs, the number of sins outnumbers the mitzvahs. And therefore, based on the numbers game, we shouldn't exist. And therefore, if we're just looking at the numbers. However, at the end of the day, in terms of now that we've been created, right, that we have no choice. Based on the numbers, we shouldn't be here. It's almost, like we said before, the fact that we exist is, blows our minds. We saw that comment before. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim says in this place to look by the numbers, we shouldn't be allowed. We're not a value-added proposition. We're not economical. We're not a good investment. We make mistakes. However, we were created, and since we have been created, we should do the best we can. So, trying to work it through. It's not very satisfying, but let's face it, you look around the world, what's going on out there. Sometimes there's some people doing some bad things, and it seems like there's more bad than good sometimes. But no, we're still ever hopeful that we can still try and be the best we can. Okay, so that may be what this Gemara is talking about. At the end of the day, we're not necessarily the best investment, but we're here. Let's be the best we can. And he has another comment in source number 10. What does it mean better for a person not to be created? Noach lo shelo haya lo achiza bivriya el kamo hamalachim shachizasem hi biyitzira. Vayidekaf lo yapol rab b'kavanas halev d'hir halev b'rab b'rabi zimra. Right? It'd be better for us, for us to be spiritual and not to have this physical component dragging us down. On the other hand, the other side says, Noach lo shenivra. No, if we didn't have a physical component holding us back, we would not have the accomplishments of the spiritual side. No, the beauty of life is in the challenge. So one school of thought says, better not to be created, don't have those challenges and opportunities. And the other school says, no, better to have those physical challenges and opportunities, because that's where the beauty of life is to be found. And V'nimnu v'gamru, they decided, no, better shalom nivra, better for us not to be created, right? It clearly would be better, we would have fewer pitfalls. But since we have been created, then the name of the game is to try and make the most and optimize our spiritual selves within a physical component. So, Rabbi Yosef Chaim is trying to look at this from two different components. One, let's face it, human beings often do bad things. Better not to have them, but we're here. So overall, though, we're a net positive. Once we've been created, we have to be the best we can. Or from a spiritual perspective, it would be better if we didn't have physicality holding us back. But bottom line is, it's a reality. This Gemara for Rabbi Yosef Chaim is kind of a theoretical, but in the practical realm, we have to do the best we can. And in this respect, it's that ever-present tension in terms of, if anyone has ever heard an angry child say, "I wish I was never born," well, they're saying something that the Gemara says. But we know that's not what they mean. It means in that moment. So just like in the Gemara, in the moment, and based on just the numbers and the facts and the strict logic, there's some downside to human beings being created. But when all is said and done, we have a tremendous opportunity. So that's this piece of Gemara as well. So overall, there seems to be some sensitivity in our sources to this idea that we're created against our will and it's not fair. But Judaism and Torah want us to transcend that mindset and to try and optimize and turn our lives into lives of meaning, purpose, value. And even if we're not necessarily the most logical investment, it's a reality and we have to make the most of it. Again,
Rabbi, if I
Yes.
win that $615 million jackpot, I may be very grateful to my parents that I was born.
there you go. I'd even be
And
grateful with the $500 million jackpot. The other
That's
one.
fine too, but I didn't win that one.
Jeannie, you won it already. You won already.
So there you have it. I do not know. I tried to find out. I don't think the lawsuit is proceeding in India with this individual, but it certainly gave us food for thought this morning.
Thank you.
Interesting class.
What's the name of that documentary again?
Surviving Death.
And what is that, on YouTube? Where is that
It's
available?
on Netflix.
Thank you.